Hi, I'm Sean Larkin. I'm from PlanFirst Pinnacle Design based in Auckland, specializing in architecture, interior, and landscape design. So we've been doing a little mini series on different site typologies, the challenges and the benefits of each of them. We're talking about our fourth site typology today. Last week we spoke about beach or coastal sites, and today we're going to be talking about rural or lifestyle sites. Now, lifestyle living has become very, very popular as cities have become more congested. People want to move more into the country. They want bigger properties. This comes along with a whole variety of additional benefits to the homeowner. Having a bigger property, more privacy, more space to have, if you wanted to have some livestock, bigger gardens, etc., etc. Then you also get the really rural properties. They would be farms, maybe properties in very mountainous areas that are less accessible. But today we're going to have a look at just these types of sites and the benefits and challenges to them. So firstly, what is a lifestyle estate or a rural site? So I briefly did explain it earlier. Now, the difference between a lifestyle estate and a rural estate or site would be that lifestyle estates are normally formal townships or developments where you just have bigger blocks of land, but you would still have neighboring properties in reasonably close proximity. Normally, there wouldn't really be farming activities on these sites, but it does give the homeowner the benefit of having the bigger piece of ground. Whereas farms, on the other hand, are normally used for commercial farming, so be it cattle, sheep, crops, vineyards, that type of thing. So they always would be located outside of cities or towns, and that brings challenges along with it. Normally they would have long driveways because typically there are factors that you'd look at as to where you would build your specific house on that site. So you normally wouldn't build it very close to the road, which does mean that you would have longer driveways than you would in normal circumstances. Also, that nice, beautiful open yard does also bring some challenges with it, which we'll chat about later. It does mean that the actual house is more exposed to the elements, especially wind. Which means you got to just think carefully about sheltering the house against the elements, but again, not blocking the views. So why are rural sites different? It does give you the opportunity to really respond well to the landscape that you are in. So you'd have to look very carefully at where to position the house on your site. And one of the main considerations would be typically views would be number one, but also very importantly is because you have to take care of all your own services normally. I've got some images later in an African landscape where you would see the house is actually positioned where the water source is. So if you are using natural water, which you most probably would be in most instances, you would want to position the house where that natural water is located, because then it just means that you don't have to pipe it from the water source to the house, which could add to the cost. So things to have a look at: sun and orientation. You're very lucky usually on a rural site. You can face your house directly to the sun in most instances, unless you're lucky enough to have a view that you really want to position the house towards. But that is one of the very big benefits. Wind exposure I wouldn't say it's the biggest factor. You would have more wind on a coastal site, but it is still, because you don't have neighboring buildings, you would have more wind than you would in an urban or a suburban environment. So normally what we would do is we would use planting and vegetation generally to screen against the prevailing wind. And of course, you've got the opportunity to have that beautiful outdoor living, indoor-outdoor experience. Privacy, I would not say is such a factor for rural living, because you generally don't have people directly next to you. You normally don't see another house, and unless you're in a lifestyle block, which means you probably would see your neighbors, so then it would become more of a factor. Then servicing and drainage are all things that we'll chat about a little bit later, but keeping in mind, if you are going rural, then you would be using things like septic tanks and stormwater retention in some instances, not always. And with a lifestyle or rural site, there is a lot of maintenance, more maintenance than a normal site. So you would need storage for things like electric mowers or petrol mowers, but you would have a lot more maintenance. Maybe you've got a tractor, a boat. Normally, if you've got a dam on your property, having a boat would be a really nice value add to your lifestyle. And those don't always need to be attached to the actual house. They can be separate, but good to accommodate a barn or a shed, just to make sure that those things like boats and tractors are stored under cover indoors, so that they don't get affected too much by the weather and the elements. So your biggest opportunity with your lifestyle estate is if you have a view, which normally 9 times out of 10 you would have. You can take advantage of that view. You've got a lot more privacy than you do in an urban environment, so it gives you a lot more flexibility as far as your outdoor spaces are concerned. And also you've got that amazing connection to nature. So generally what we try and do is we try and design according to the landscape and try and make that house sit as comfortably as possible in the landscape. And just, I would say, use that as your blank canvas when you start designing or thinking about building on one of these sites. Is have a look at your views first and foremost. If you are building on a lifestyle estate, usually they would, in most instances, have some form of services, be it electricity or sewer. Stormwater, it's always important to design for stormwater. On these rural sites, very nice to have grass planted around your house, which also does help with erosion, because that rainwater will go directly into the grass, and you will have very little erosion in an instance like this. Then your site placement. So you would have a look at things like, where does the sun come from? Where are the best views? Where's the prevailing wind? A lot of these questions get repeated through all site typologies. So because we're just speaking about this one today, for those of you that are interested, we have done a whole series on different sites. So you can go and have a look at one of the others if you don't have a rural property. So these questions get generally asked throughout all site typologies. Access. Where does the road sit in relation to the house? You wouldn't want to build your house too far away from the access road, because of course then you'd have a very long driveway. And if you do have services, then you would want to build reasonably close to those services so that you don't have to extend them. I know in South Africa, where I come from, Often you'll find that farmhouses, even though they've got really big pieces of land, the farmhouse is always situated quite close to the main road. And the reason for that is because the council will take the services along that main road, and they would service the farm as close to the main road, well, wherever their service is running. So the farmer would then generally build his house close to that service that has been provided for him for that exact reason. Because the alternative, if you build further away, you'd have to rely on solar panels or maybe battery operated generators and things like that. So just something to consider when you are looking at it. You would also try and look for a reasonably flat piece of the site, because that does keep your construction costs down. And you want that indoor-outdoor living. Views, of course, paramount, because you are living in this beautiful paradise. So you want to be able to see it at all times. If you do have a view similar to the beach site that we spoke about last time, you would want your living areas to have the best possible view, because that is where you spend most of your time. Your outdoor patios, barbecue areas, if you've got a swimming pool, take advantage of the view that you do have. I would place bedrooms secondary when it comes to taking advantage of the views, and the reason for that is you're going to, the hours that you are going to spend in the bedroom is going to be nighttime, so it'll be dark outside. So keep your views for the areas you spend your waking hours in. And then again, just mindful of neighbors if you are in a lifestyle estate. There are ways of blocking it off. Generally, you would face your view or your living area directly towards the view. If you do need to screen for privacy, you can do that on either side of the patio. And importantly, you also do want to prevent overexposure due to wind. So lots of factors to factor in. Decide what is most important for you as a family, and use that as your driving force when having a look at the design. Sun and orientation, as I mentioned previously, you've got free reign. You don't have that much restriction on a farm or on a lifestyle estate. So face north or south, depending on what hemisphere you're in. Morning and afternoon sun is also something to take into consideration. Morning sun is very bright and can cause a lot of glare. And afternoon sun, if you've got a lot of western sun coming into your room, it does make that room very hot. So just be careful of that. We generally try to have minimal openings on the western facade for that exact reason, that we don't want the house to get overheated. Shading is important, especially in warm climates as well. So have a nice wraparound patio that will help with shading, and it'll give you many different opportunities for outdoor living. Natural light, I always talk about this quite extensively. Crucial, in my opinion, natural light and natural ventilation. You don't have very many restrictions as far as privacy is concerned on a rural site. So it's a lot easier, if I can say that, to design on a rural site because the restrictions are less. Just keep in mind the exposure, because you don't have the buildings next to you. The challenges. So here we've got an image of a house that is in an African setting, and you'll see that the house has been built where the water source is located, and you can see that from the windmill. So generally the windmill, they will install the windmill where the underground water source is, and you will only have that in certain places. You're not going to have that all over the farm. So That is a big driving factor. Also, if you do have strong wind, some areas obviously have more wind than others. You would want to protect, this patio is quite nicely protected from the wind. So you do have one of the wings of the farmhouse on the side, just protecting that patio. Distance from services I've mentioned already, but oftentimes with farmhouses, you will not actually have services that are provided by council. So your water supply, electricity, your stormwater runoff, your sewer, that all needs to be provided by the homeowner. And because it is far from where you would generally find builders, it is expensive to transport the materials unless you're using materials from the area, like stone in this case. But the labor, to get the labor there as well, it is a cost factor. So definitely it would be a more expensive build than if you were building in a suburban environment. Internet connections, of course, I mean, Starlink would probably be the answer in this case, because there would be no fiber in this area. So just things to keep in mind. All right, here we have an image of a house which is on a vineyard. So probably in one of the European countries, I would imagine. And this house has been designed to shelter the homeowners from the wind. So the house being placed in a U shape with a courtyard in the middle already immediately screens the wind from 3 sides. And then on the open side, they have planted some hedges, which will screen the wind to an extent. I mean, you will always get some wind, but you won't get the severe wind that you would if let's say, for instance, this farmhouse was just a rectangular block. You'd have a lot more wind exposure. So use courtyards when designing for strong winds. You can use solid walls as well. Carefully place your windows. I think that goes without saying. And just shelter your living space with plants. It does add that greenery. It does anchor you to the landscape as well, which is what you generally want to do when you are building in a rural environment. And then have more than one outdoor space, which we spoke about with the beach, coastal sites as well. If you do have wind on one side of the house, have, if I can say, a backup entertainment area or living space on the other side of the house, so that you've always got one outdoor space that you can utilize. Then outdoor living, I think that is one of the biggest driving forces for buying a rural site. Is you want that quality of life, the relaxed feel. You want to feel that you can unwind in your space. You don't have the hustle and bustle of the city. So just design for that. Decide what it is how you use your living space. Do you use a fire? Do you want a fire pit? Have you got a swimming pool, a hot tub? All those types of things. If you do have a hot tub, have it in a sheltered area, but make sure you still have the view. Of course, we all want the best of all worlds all the time, and it's not impossible. And then just design for everyday life. Great indoor-outdoor connection, this. Generally you want to get up in the morning, you want to open those doors and have that inside-outside connection during the day. Now, this is an interesting one. Your access and arrival of your rural site. Keeping in mind that you're going to have most probably a long road from the main road to your farmhouse. Even though you do have that long road, you don't want to just arrive at the house. Have some form of arrival point. Even if it's just a small gate like this, it just does give you that feeling of arrival. And it's the entry experience. You know that when you cross the threshold, you're in the farmstead. So it's a bit of psychological relaxation as well, or, psychological arrival. Garage positions in relation to the house, you would, if you do have, in this instance, your garage is close to your house, you wouldn't be using those garages for your tractors and your boats. They would be for vehicles. Have your service vehicles located elsewhere. Make sure you've got enough turning circles. You've got all the space that you need. So there's no excuse for anything to be cramped when you're designing on a rural site. And make it comfortable for people that are visiting you, or if people are delivering to your home and it is rural, there's no need for it to be an unpleasant experience. Make it comfortable. Give there enough turning circles, etc. Now, one of the biggest factors is your services. So plan them practically from the start. You always would want to find your water source first. So have your water tanks, because it could possibly happen that underground water, that water level does rise and fall. So have water tanks, harvest your rainwater as well. Have a filtration system so that your drinking water is clean. A lot of thought needs to go into these things before you start the build. Your wastewater systems need to be very carefully looked at as well. There's probably septic tanks, French drains in rural environments. Stormwater management, yes, it is always important, but I don't think it's as big a factor here as it is in some of the other sites that we've looked at. Generally, because when you are building on a rural site or a lifestyle estate, you would be able to find a location very suitable that is flat. So it's seldom that you'll find a farmhouse that is built on a real steep slope. So you wouldn't really have that much erosion due to the fact that you've got this flat site. Having said that, just beware of flooding, because flooding is a real thing. Still do elevate your house a little bit, just to mitigate that risk. Fire access, I think by the time the fire brigade gets to your house, it's most probably been burnt to the ground already. But give it some thought. Maybe if you are, let's say, in a wooded area and you have a lot of trees around you, maybe have a fire break between yourself or your house and the trees. I don't think there's too much you'd be able to do if you had to have a fire. You wouldn't really be able to rely on council fire brigade unless you're in a lifestyle estate, but certainly on a farm, it would be a challenge. And then just things you would do in normal suburbia as well is space for your dustbins, storage space, equipment space. Having to maintain big gardens, you do need more equipment. So have a dedicated space for that. Design it into your plans when you're doing the planning. Even if it is located further away from the house, that's perfectly acceptable. Just expanding on that, having space for cars, bikes, tools, mowers, outdoor equipment. This is actually a good example of the fire break that I was talking about earlier. Is from a fire perspective, it could probably be a good idea just to move the tree line back slightly, so that if you do have a fire, a forest fire, the likelihood of the fire jumping to the farmhouse is reduced. And often animal feed. Often these properties do have animals, some form of livestock. So you would need storage space for their feed, and also if they do need to be kept indoors at night, not all that likely, but you will have predators. So just plan all those things at the get-go. Privacy, we have spoken about that previously, but this is an example. I thought this was quite a good example of the screen wall that they've got on the left-hand side. So it could be that there is another homeowner on the left-hand side that they are providing privacy against, or you could have the prevailing wind coming in from that side. So just a little bit of shelter if you do have that prevailing wind or you do have neighbors close by. Planting, if you are living on a farm or rural property, I always recommend to my clients, landscape your garden, but landscape it so that it complements the environment that you're in and the landscape that you're in. So plant indigenous bushes, plants, trees around the property so that it actually blends in with the environment. It doesn't look, like a totally different environment. You wouldn't use an English rose garden in an environment like this, I think, for obvious reasons. So just blend it nicely, soften the house with landscaping. It makes a massive difference. Also, it reduces the heat because you don't have the glare off if it was just, in this instance, bare soil. So it reduces heat and it also helps shelter a little bit against the wind. So the question of this mini series is, can any 250 square meter house work on this site? And as always, yes, it's probably the easiest site to fit a 250 square meter house on because you have the space. But again, where's the access road? Where are the views? Where's the orientation? So just respond to all the questions that you ask. Protect from the wind, and make the indoor-outdoor livable. What might need to change is your orientation. Window placement also important. You might want to frame some views with picture windows. You might want to close off your western facade if there are windows on the west and you are in a really hot environment. And then also you might want to add covers, patio covers around the house, especially for arid regions and hot areas, just for a bit of shade. Your roof form is also important. Although we're talking about a 250 square meter house, we're not really talking about what the house looks like. We're just talking layout. But just to touch on the roof design, you would actually want the roof to fit the environment that it's in. So you wouldn't necessarily go for real, ornamental type of design in an environment like this. Keep your lines horizontal, blend with the landscape, let the house just settle in nicely to the landscape. And then some really good design strategies for rural design would be just the careful house placement, the orientation, the framed views, which goes a long way. Practical access, of course. In this image, you can also see just the sense of arrival that they've got with a small gate. And really, it doesn't have any function other than a sense of arrival. It's a low wall. It's not going to keep predators or unwanted visitors out. But it's just to have that sense of arrival so that you don't just arrive at the house. It's a sequential experience. Durable material is also important because you don't want to be, every time somebody needs to come do maintenance, a contractor needs to come and do maintenance on the house, it is going to be more expensive because it is a further distance for them to travel. So try and use durable materials that don't need too much maintenance. And then just let it sit nicely in the landscape, let it blend in, let it feel relaxed and natural and part of the environment. and let it support your lifestyle. That is first and foremost, the most important thing is you need to feel comfortable and relaxed in your own home. So make sure it's got that sense of calm. The environment certainly lends itself to that. Again, just a little checklist of things to have a look at when you are designing rural or lifestyle. And then really just the bottom line is a rural home should feel like it belongs there. So embrace your surroundings and let the house speak for itself. Next week is going to be our last talk on this topic, and we're going to be talking about the regular suburban flat site that most people live on, because most of us do live in cities. So this is just going to be a really same talking points that we have spoken about in the previous sites, just to let you, each of these sites have got their own challenges and advantages and benefits. So we'll just be talking about the suburban flat site. And after this mini series, we will move away a little bit from architecture and go back to more topics, talking about interior design. Specifically, if you are wanting to put your property on the market, what are things that home or potential buyers are looking for when they come to view a property that is on the market to be sold? So that'll be our next topic after next week that we have. And my details, feel free to drop me a line if you've got questions, comments. Please like the video, it does help us a lot. And thank you for watching.